If you travel around Europe, it seems like no matter which country you go to, every city has a square, or a place, or a plaza, or a plaza, or a piazza, or a plaz. The names are different, but the idea is the same. It's a large public space, dead center of the most active part of the city, a central hub where you can meet up with people and grab some food and socialize freely. Or if you're like me, you can just be by yourself but still feel intimately connected to the beating heart of the city. And when you come back to the US, you might wonder, why does this not exist in our country? Well, today I'm going to make the argument that it does. Maybe not to the extent you'd hope, but US cities actually do have some excellent examples of what I'd call public squares or plazas. And I am going to give you my top 10, but just a word of warning. I did try to do this quantitatively just because that's how my brain works. But today's list is very much about more qualitative aspects of planning, like architecture and urban design, which are absolutely not my wheelhouse. But they are part of the core curriculum in just about any graduate planning program. And even though my career went in more of a transportation planning and engineering direction, the projects I worked on often included an urban design or landscape architecture element that we'd have to farm out to a sub-consultant. So, not my lane professionally, but as someone who's obsessed with cities, I always find myself gravitating to great urban design when I see it. And the opinions I have about what makes a public space great are influenced by, yeah, my professional planning career, but also a couple of books. Primarily this one, a classic of the field, William Hawley White's The Social Life of Small Urban Spaces. And yes, this is a recommendation. It's dated in a charming way, but it's also still highly relevant, highly insightful, and at points, just extremely funny. It's also largely the basis for how I evaluated the places I looked at for today's list. Here are some elements I looked for. Is it designed for people to be able to sit and linger? In other words, is the architecture non-hostile? Does it incorporate shade and sun? And this can be trees or other kinds of canopy. Water elements are a plus, which I don't fully understand, but I think is true. Does it have an active, permeable relationship to the street as opposed to feeling cut off and invisible? Is there a variety of food available, either on site or around the perimeter? And this can include food carts. Also, just is it obviously popular? Does it show up in architectural best of lists? Does it have a disproportionately high number of Google reviews? I mixed all of this together and came up with numbers, but ultimately, this does come down to gut feel. Your gut may tell you something different, and that's cool. Just leave it down in the comments. So, I'm going to give you a top 10, but I will have a bunch of honorable mentions, including some places that are plaza like, but didn't quite fit the definition of what I was looking for, so stick around for that. And that is the setup, so let's get into it. 10 Public Square, right in the heart of Cleveland, Ohio. Honestly, part of the reason it's here is because of the trajectory. 10 or 15 years ago, Public Square would not have made this list. It was split into four kind of useless quadrants to accommodate traffic running right through the middle. After a long renovation, the city reopened it in 2016 with Ontario Street vacated entirely and the footprint of Superior Street significantly reduced with only transit and bikes allowed. A nice bit of urban design, and Public Square performs really well on another aspect I think is important, which is it enveloped by great urban architecture, and Cleveland wins on this count. 9. Union Square in San Francisco. I'm just going to be honest, there's a lot I don't like about Union Square. It's a bit of a glorified underground parking garage cover. It doesn't interface with the surrounding streets in quite as permeable ways I'd like to see. It almost feels a bit too commercial, surrounded as it is by department stores and hotels. But the urban design is pretty solid. There's a Muni subway entrance integrated into the block, and it's San Francisco, one of our densest cities, which also makes a huge difference. A popular, well-used public square is really an indicator of a city that gets a lot of things right, and despite its faults, San Francisco really does. 8. Copley Square Park in Boston. For the most part, entries on this list are going to be right in the heart of the city, but Copley Square Park is not exactly that. It's a bit more back bay, but it really has all the elements. Extremely visible and permeable from the street. enveloped by an identifiable urban fabric, lots of places to sit, lots of food options on site and adjacent. Another thing you'll often see, a seasonal farmers market or other special events. One thing I want to address here, you might ask, what about Boston Common? I had to differentiate between a public plaza, which I think Copley Square Park is, and just a city park, which is how I would categorize Boston Common. It's not always a straightforward distinction, which we'll talk more about later, but let me know where you land down in the comments. 7. Jackson Square, New Orleans. Most of what I'm sharing on this list is going to have lots of modern urban design bells and whistles. Jackson Square is not that. It's really here on the strength of historical value and its role as a New Orleans tourism hotspot. This isn't a history channel, but that aspect is fascinating. The square dates from 1721. Originally Place d'Armes under French rule, Plaza de Armas under Spanish rule, and then Jackson Square from 1815 on. So it's almost on this list more because of its lineage and the picturesque surroundings than any urban design aspect of the square itself. 6. Washington Park in Cincinnati's Over the Rhine. This one kind of gives you the best of both worlds, state-of-the-art urban design with tons of features and amenities, but also surrounded by the architecture that's really distinctive to Cincinnati, including the music hall, which is just such a showstopper. It is sort of a city park with kids' play equipment and a dog run, but I think it functions more like a plaza, and it has another characteristic great modern urban public spaces have, which is lots of programming and events. By the way, if the Wienermobile doesn't show up, I'm gonna be incredibly disappointed. 5. Market Square in Pittsburgh. This one is kind of absurd because I did a whole video on location in Pittsburgh last year and didn't even get to Market Square. Shows you how much of a city nerd I am. So let's do what this channel does best and Google tour it. Not particularly large or modern, but you've got an Oktoberfest going on, and the frontage abutting the square is just massively charming. Is it a tourist magnet? Yeah, probably, but that tends to be true of things that are central and well designed, and that does pretty much describe everything on this list. 4. Portland's Pioneer Courthouse Square. I tried to be as objective as possible, but I have a long history with this one. I actually still have it marked as work in my personal Google account. My office was literally on the next block south. The square only dates from 1984, site of the Portland Hotel until it was demolished in 1951, and then it was just a parking crater for a couple misbegotten decades after that. Now it's Portland's living room and thoroughly woven into the identity of downtown. Solid urban fabric on all four sides, tons of seating on the steps that curve around the square, and these days a pretty top-notch selection of food carts right at the back of the eastbound Max platform. Okay, top 3 still to come, and I've got several honorable and other kinds of mentions coming up too. Connect on all the usual websites to keep up with the latest channel goings-on, including New York, April 24th at Hunter College on the Upper East Side. The program we're putting together for this is shaping up to be a lot of fun. Tickets going fast last time I checked. I've got a link down the description if you're interested in coming out. I'm really looking forward to this one. Let's hit some honorables. Kind of like Boston Common, Millennium Park in Chicago is iconic and it's a really nice piece of urban design, but I couldn't really consider it because it's too big and sprawling to call it a square or a plaza, and it isn't really enveloped by urban fabric in the way I was looking for. Temple Square in Salt Lake City just doesn't feel like public space in the way I'm thinking of it. I avoided places that are kind of dominated by buildings that are on the site itself, especially denominational ones, but aesthetically, actually pretty cool. And I don't often say nice things about Oklahoma on this channel, but I have to say, Oklahoma City Scissortail Park, very nice, just too big and not enveloped. And Myriad Botanical Gardens, too much institutional use and not enough public square, but super nice design. And Tulsa, Guthrie Green, pretty close to making the top 10 today. Just kind of a shocking amount of interesting urban design ideas coming out of the Sooner State. Let's talk Texas too. Republic Square in Austin wasn't too far off this list, and two others that are really nice on an urban design level. Clyde Warren Park in Dallas had a lot of the elements I wanted, but here's a criterion I looked at. Everything on this list had a walk score rating of 94 or higher, and a lot of them were perfect 100s. Clyde Warren Park is an 84. And then Discovery Green in downtown Houston, also a beautiful bit of landscape architecture, but just a little more of a park than a true plaza. And walk score rating of 79, just not gonna cut it for this list. Okay, let's do the top three, and I'm pretty happy with all of these, but you definitely can and should critique the order. I've got Rittenhouse Square in Philadelphia at 3. Philadelphia is actually a challenge because the city itself is more associated with the idea of a public square than any other US city. It's even in the name of the city's Urbanist Political Action Committee, which references the fact that City Hall itself rests on a central square that's surrounded by 4 others, all of them interesting in their own right, but I think Rittenhouse is a pretty easy choice for Philly. I could honestly go into a whole analysis of urban form and connectivity and surrounding urban fabric, but really, just walking around the area in Street View sells the whole thing. 2. Campus Martius in downtown Detroit. I actually struggled with placing this one. On the one hand, it's sort of a glorified traffic circle and it feels slightly disconnected from the rest of the street grid. On the other hand, it's downtown Detroit, which just has the weirdest, coolest street grid of any major US city center. Maybe there's an argument for DC. And I made this point in the Detroit video, but the angularity of the grid means you just get these incredible views all around Campus Martius. And then it's just a beautifully designed space, lots of seating, a bit of green space, nice mix of sun and shade, an area where you can put your toes in the sand, food on site and surrounding the square. It really has something for everyone and packs it into a compact, beautiful urban space. Number 1, I kind of wanted to say that I could have picked from several public spaces in New York and any of them could be number 1, but I actually don't think that's true. Like, I have a lot of fondness for places like Washington Square and Madison Square. I even have a big soft spot for Union Square, but number 1 for me has to be Bryant Park. It really checks all the boxes I had in a way that no other location on this list really does. Absolutely designed for lingering with tons of seating, beautiful design with lots of opportunities for sun and shade, dovetails beautifully into the urban fabric of Midtown, on the back porch of the New York Public Library, bounded by highly trafficked streets, 42nd Street and 6th Avenue, but also the quieter 40th. The view of the American Radiator Building by itself practically makes this number 1. An absolute wealth of food options with tons of kiosks on the perimeter of the park, and it's New York. There are a million places to grab food within like a block. So beautifully enveloped in our nation's most iconically urban setting. Walk score 100 doesn't even do it justice. And you know what? Its own subway station. Not a criterion, but maybe it should have been. I'll see you in a few weeks, New York. And that's all I've got. Thanks for joining today, and thanks as always to the patrons for your direct support. It really helps keep the content spigot turned on and helps me keep reaching new people who really care about their cities, but for whatever reason, just don't know it yet. Thanks to the Nebula subscribers as well. Keep the great topic suggestions coming. You know, next Wednesday is April 1st, so I'm going to have something pretty absurd coming, but I'll see you then.